Great. Thank you for having me. Thanks for inviting me, Joe, to talk about my research. I'm not sure, my two supervisors may be here, Vincent and Ellie. So if you're here, hi.
I
Um,
am. Hello.
Hi. So yeah, I'm here to talk about my research, which is all about supporting neurodiversity in online education. I'm just going to start. I think probably if you're part of SMaRteN, you're probably all aware of what neurodiversity is, but just in case. So neurodiversity basically describes the idea that people experience and interact with the world in many different ways, and that these variations are differences, not deficits. And so these differences in the human brain do impact things like sociability, learning, attention, mood, and other mental functions, but they are viewed in a non-pathological way. So it was originally coined by Judy Singer, who's a sociologist who's autistic and who started using the term neurodiversity in the late 90s in a chapter that she wrote. And at the time, she was specifically referring to autism. But since then, it has come to encompass many neurodevelopmental differences, such as ADHD, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, Tourette syndrome, dyslexia, and as you may know, a lot of these are very often co-occurring and also underdiagnosed. So based on the prevalence that we know about, on the overlap between these conditions and their underdiagnosis, some estimates say that there is probably between 15 and 20% of the population worldwide who has a condition that would fit under the umbrella term of neurodiversity. And it's also important to keep in mind that this is a fairly new field of research, and that not everyone agrees as to what conditions should be included. So there's no definite list of conditions under that umbrella term. And some researchers also include other conditions like OCD or schizophrenia. So there may be even more people that fit under that umbrella term of neurodiversity. So why does it matter to study neurodiversity in online education, which is my project? So so now that we that you know a little bit about what neurodiversity is, you probably have guessed that all classrooms are neurodiverse. So even if you don't have a student in a classroom that has a formal diagnosis of a condition that fits under the umbrella term of neurodiversity, there are many brain variations that you'll find in any classroom. So I think it just helps to think of any classroom as neurodiverse rather than some of them. Another thing is that, as I mentioned, neurodiversity impacts attention, memory, sociability, mood, and a lot of other mental functions that are critical to learning. And finally, online education. So what I just said is true for any type of classroom, whether face-to-face or online. But in the case of online education, students need even more self-efficacy and self-regulation. They have to make a lot of decisions on their own. They have to navigate their learning journey in a more independent way. And they may not get the same amount of support that they would get in face-to-face education. So neurodiversity may have a bigger impact in online education than it does in face-to-face education. So before we can support neurodiversity in online education, it's important to understand it and understand the experience of neurodivergent students in online education. So this is why in the first part of my PhD project, we decided to conduct a systematic review of the existing literature exploring the experience of neurodivergent students in online education. Oh, and I just want to, just a quick note that I'll be using the terms neurotypical and neurodivergent students. So that refers to students who are considered of standard neurodevelopmental and cognitive functioning versus what's considered non-standard. But again, I'm using these terms in a non-pathological way. So as I said, the goal of this systematic review was to retrieve and analyze the existing literature looking at the experience of neurodivergent students in online education. And so for the results, at least the analysis was quite quick because there was very little out there looking at this. We only retrieved 7 studies, which shows there's really a dearth of research looking at those experiences for neurodivergent students. And one of these studies was really interesting because it was a big data analysis conducted by the Open University that clearly showed that neurodivergent students in online education are both first, they're less likely to pass the modules that they have completed, but also they're less likely to obtain good grades for the modules that they have passed. And this is based on a lot of data from the Open University. And so I basically looked at all of the 7 studies that were retrieved through the search and conducted a narrative synthesis and found that most of the challenges of neurodivergent students in online education could be classified as either cognitive, instructional, or social. And I'm just going to walk you through these. So the first types of challenges are difficulties studying and learning. So a lot of neurodivergent students report higher levels of inattention, lower levels of self-awareness of that inattention, which obviously makes it harder to manage for them. They struggle to stay focused. So once they've managed to direct their attention to something they want to study, they have a really hard time staying focused on that content. And they also report poor online information seeking skills. So that's also something that obviously impacts their ability to find the information that they need in order to study and learn. Another set of challenges is because of poor instructional design. So something that I think affects everyone, but particularly neurodivergent students, is the lack of design consistency in the use of by virtual learning environments by instructors. So for example, some courses are going to be designed in a specific way where maybe there's going to be slides, maybe there's going to be videos or images or text, and another instructor, or sometimes the same instructor for another module, is going to completely change the way they design their course. So every time the students have to go through the hurdle of figuring out how exactly the design works. There's also very often in online education an overload of irrelevant information. So in a face-to-face classroom, the teacher will just go through the curriculum and explain the content. Whereas in online education, a lot of instructors tend to just dump a lot of content and extra links, thinking sometimes that the more content, more helpful it's going to be for students. And again, if a student has high self-efficacy and self-regulation and high metacognition, they may be able to sift through all of this and figure out what information is the most relevant. But for neurodivergent students, this can feel very overwhelming. Another thing that is kind of tied to the design consistency is the confusing menu structures. Again, there's lots of different ways to organize a menu, but some of them are also very overwhelming and confusing for neurodivergent students. As a result, a lot of neurodivergent students have difficulties finding the information that they need. And finally, in terms of instructional design, sometimes assessment formats are incompatible with their condition. So if you think, for example, of people who have dysgraphia and who need to write or dyslexia and need to read and write very long essays. So that's something that may be more challenging for them than it would be for a neurotypical student. And finally, another big set of challenges for neurodivergent students is the lack of social support in online education. So the first thing that's very important is that a lot of neurodivergent students are not going to disclose their condition for fear of negative labels. And in some of the studies, some students have reported that they're scared that if they disclose their condition, they may be branded as lazy or disorganized or whatever labels that some people may tend to associate with some of these conditions. So they just don't disclose it. And with that makes it even harder for instructors to support them in a way that is adapted to the challenges that they face. Another thing that was mentioned in some of the studies is the lack of confidence in online communication. In particular, a lot of dyslexic students were saying that it was really hard sometimes to keep up with online chats because the conversations were all over the place. It was going very quickly, and also because people tend, when typing up things online, to use, how do you say that? Kind of like shorter version, abbreviations of words that that dyslexic students are not familiar with, and which makes very complicated for them to understand what the discussion is about, and makes it difficult for them to join and participate. Another problem that they face in online education is the lack of access to student support services. So one of the studies found that in lots of cases, when people are switching to online education, there's either reduced student support services, or sometimes it's completely removed. Basically, it's only available for students who are going face-to-face, who are going on campus. And another problem is that in online education, students very often have fewer non-educational related social interactions that promote their well-being. And that's very important and can have a big impact on the mental health of neurodivergent students who don't have all of these different interactions outside of purely educational interactions. So it's important, like when you look at all of these different challenges, to remember that this is based on a very, very small set of studies, only 7 studies. So we really need to have more research looking at how we can support neurodivergent students in online education, and how we can make online learning more inclusive for neurodiverse classrooms. So different areas of research gaps that were identified in those studies were looking into ways to manage mental effort in online education, how to increase digital confidence in neurodivergent students, and how to reduce anxiety, and many other gaps. Like there's just so little that there's a lot of research to be done. I've highlighted here my PhD research project is going to be about how to manage mental effort in online education for neurodiverse classrooms. And we're going to start with focus groups in a couple of months, and then we're going to use everything we learn through those discussions to design a large-scale survey and to look at actual differences in neurotypical and neurodivergent students, but also similarities, so we can figure out if it makes sense to have more of an adaptive or inclusive approach to online education. And then in the last phase, we're going to conduct experiments where we will look at how all these factors have a different impact on the brains of different students. And the end goal at the end of the PhD, hopefully, is to be able to provide evidence-based guidelines for inclusive online education to institutions, so they can make sure that everyone in every classroom gets the best education possible and the best learning experience possible, and that no one is left behind. So that's it. I want to thank Joe again for inviting me, but also for letting me post this ad for our research advisory board. So we really want this research to be reflective and respectful and inclusive. So we currently have five people on our board, but we're always looking for more people to give me feedback and suggestions, whether it's on protocol design or even of the execution of the research. So if you go to the SMaRteN blog, there's more information there and ways to reach out to me. And I've put my email here, but again, that's in the blog post as well, if you want to be in touch and join our board or even as a participant in the future. So thank you.